So today we are going to have a bookish chat talking about my reading journey, update on my analysis journey, and then, of course, talking about author events. So to start with, I really want to share about my reading journey because so many people talk about being readers their whole lives and writing since they could hold a crayon. But my journey, this isn't really like that. I only found my way back to novels last year through audiobooks, and once I realised how much I loved them, there was no stopping me. And I ended up finishing 24 books, 20 of which were novels. And there was one in particular called Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz that got me completely sucked in. Because the book felt like a conversation between me and the author. Magpie Murders is a very ambitious murder mystery. It felt like the author was playing a game and I was watching him play chess and pointing out, oh, I saw that move. I see what you're planning. I see what you did there. I didn't miss it. And then further along to start guessing what move he's about to make and the thrill when I didn't see them coming. The key thing, unlike any other mystery story, whether that's a novel, film, or TV show, I was actively engaged in playing detective and I trusted the author knew exactly what all the pieces were, where he was going, and wouldn't drop any of the threads. And it was this book that I thought, wow, I would love to do something like that, to engage a reader like that, and to take someone on a journey. Now, my book is nothing like that, and I think I'm more character driven than plot driven. But I wanted to start with something really simple rather than overwhelm myself and give up. However, in the future, I would love to attempt to write a compelling mystery somewhere down the line. So that's what got me started down the path of writing. And there's so much advice out there on how to become a writer, how to improve your writing. And a lot of it is conflicting, but there is one piece of advice that everyone can agree on, and that is to read. So that's what I'm doing. For this year, my goal was to finish 3 books a month, and I am smashing my goal so much that I have increased it to 4 per month. I'm still on track. I am a slow reader, but I have fallen in love with physically reading books. Of the 14 books I've finished this year so far, I have read rather than listened to 6 compared to 0 from last year, and I am really happy with that. I listen faster than I read, which I think is unusual. Let me know which is faster for you. But I'm finding my concentration is growing. Last year, I could only read 5 to 7 pages in a single sitting, but now I can read 20. And I'm also reading some harder books. I've joined a book club where we only read classics to push me to read books that I want to read but would not otherwise have made time and would not have made it to the top of my list. From that, I've already read Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and this month, The Waves by Virginia Woolf. I'm really enjoying the challenge of these harder, slower books, mixed in with more modern and easier books like Anthony Horowitz and Beth O'Leary. But as I read through these, I don't just want to read them passively as a reader, but also I want to learn from them as a writer. Which leads me to my analysis goals. I had such grand plans and they did not work out, which is fine. You got to give it a go and try and find out what works and what doesn't. So I had 3 notebooks and 3 plans. Plan 1 was to do a chapter by chapter analysis. I started easy with Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, which is a book that I love. I made it to chapter 6 before I put it down and never picked it back up. I found that going through the whole book with the analysis lens took the fun out of reading, and that just didn't work for me. Plan two was alongside that to pick out a few lines that were funny and to analyse the mechanics of how that works, why that works, and to learn different styles of humour. Untouched. Didn't even start. I still really want to do this, but I think humour analysis could be a project rather than a practice. However, plan three, where I analyse the first and last chapter of every physical book I read, is going so well. So I've done this for 5 of the 6 books because the first book I read before I started doing this. I only need to think about the first chapter and then I can sink into the book without worrying about what it all means and what all the different literary devices are being used. Should I underline this sentence or tab that section? And then when I finish the book, I can return to the final chapter and analyse that as well. And what's so interesting is by only analysing the first and last chapter, the first impression the author is giving you and the last impression they're leaving you with, from that alone, I am learning so much and it enhances the experience of the book as well. So I am dropping what's not working and I'm keeping what is, and I'm really happy something stuck. On top of reading and analysing, I have started attending author events. I have attended 3 so far, 2 of which I have never read their books. But it was still so valuable going to learn about how different authors approach writing. There must be as many ways to write a book as there are authors, if not more. My favourite, most unexpected one was with Sian Hughes. And I want to share this with you in case you feel you're going too slowly. So Sian Hughes, her debut novel, Pearl, was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2023. And she said it took 7 tries over 30 years to finish the book. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Her background is in poetry, and even from the small excerpt she read, you can feel how gorgeous her prose is. I don't think I could ever write to that level, but I also know that I'm not going to be putting in the time and the effort to get it to that level, which is fine. But I am still in awe of her process. The one author I have attended that I have read their books was Beth O'Leary, which I shared the footage of in the previous video. I got a front row seat. I asked her a question to which she gave a brilliant answer, and in the signing queue, I got to meet her and make a request, which she kindly agreed to. And what I want to talk about is something following that experience, and it's about documenting it. The age-old question, landscape or portrait? YouTube or Instagram? When you capture a spontaneous, unrepeatable moment, which do you prioritize? And for me, the answer is neither. I chose to prioritize my own experience and be present in the moment over documenting it. And this is a hard decision to make, not only for a new creator, but for anyone who wants to have the evidence to show their friends and to say, look, I met this person that I admire. So this is what I did for Beth O'Leary. I documented the before and after in landscape for YouTube, and then filmed a little bit or took a photo in portrait for Instagram. And then at the start of the interview, I took a short landscape piece of footage because I prioritize my YouTube channel. And then I put my phone down and I chose to be present. This means when I asked her a question and she looked me in the eye and gave me a thoughtful answer, I was as present as my anxiety allowed, but I have no evidence of it. And then when I met her one-on-one, I didn't document that either. Now, I'm guessing that there is an etiquette for how much time you should take up and how many things you should ask for. And for me, I think you should only ask for one thing aside from the signature. This is the moment to ask for a photo. Even if I don't document my interaction with her, I will have a photo of us together and I can cherish that and, of course, share it on social media. But I chose not to do that. Instead, I brought with me this notebook and I asked her to write one piece of advice or motivation for an aspiring author. Now, this may not sound like a lot to ask, but I think it is. She is trying to connect with each reader she meets while signing your book and maybe standing up for a photo. That is a lot to do for anyone, but particularly for the kind of person who chose to live in their head and write alone in a room for a living. But to ask her to think of something to write that is different from her usual go to phrases and signature requires something more from her. And I would not have taken offence if she had said no, but I gave it a go and she said yes. And this is what she wrote: keep writing, get to the end. This is not as glamorous on social media as a photo, but it is more meaningful to me. And I am so happy that I made that choice. Over time, I hope to fill this notebook with handwritten notes from authors that I admire and that will motivate me when I'm struggling through a draft. And to me, that is worth more than a photo. So, tonight, I am going to see one of my favourite authors, Anthony Horowitz, the author of Magpie Murders, which is the book that started me on my writing journey. I'm very excited and nervous to meet him. I am grateful that I've had a few practice runs to calm my anxiety. I've gone to an author event at the same location, so I know where to go and where to park. I've done my first signing with Beth O'Leary, which I found nerve-wracking, but she was so lovely and it was such a positive experience. So I do feel more ready to do that again. And hopefully my anxiety will let me be a little more present. So I'm just trying to be a bit more relaxed about it and enjoy the evening and listening to what he has to say, which is the part I'm most looking forward to. I don't know how much footage I will get, but that's okay. And whatever I get, I will share with you, and then we will have a final chat afterwards.
Instead of thinking about the detective, I think about the sidekick. And I had this idea: what would happen if the author of the book, who is a cleverest person in the book, became the sidekick, who largely is the most stupid one? And so instead of being on top of the hill, knowing the killer is, if I put myself into the book, I would know nothing. And that is how the books work. The setup is that Hawthorne is a detective who has been fired from the police and become a private detective. He has the idea of getting a writer to write about him, about the idea that he will get 50% of the royalties. And the writer, this is where we go to the better picture, is me. He comes to me, and so I am inside the book. That's not Watson is. So that is how it all began.
Hello, good afternoon. It's been a couple of days because I wanted to think about what I wanted to say. So, first off, let's talk about the main event. I mean, where to start? He had so much energy. He was like literally on the edge of his seat, talking directly to the audience. He was so animated and expressive. He's 70, but he had the enthusiasm of a 20-year-old. It was amazing and infectious and a little exhausting. I was sitting there thinking, how fast must his mind be going? And how does he sit still long enough to write anything? He never really directly answered the interviewer's questions. He would start in one place and then tangent off and then tangent off again, and most of the time bringing it back round, but sometimes he couldn't even remember what the question was, and then the interviewer couldn't remember what the question was either. And like hats off to the interviewer, he didn't interrupt or try to regain control. When the author just went off, he just let him go. Anthony Horowitz was so entertaining and such a talker. He didn't need an interviewer. He could have just talked for like 3 hours without pause, and we, the audience, would have been hanging on his every word the whole time. The information itself, the advice, the anecdotes, etc., wasn't new for me because I'd heard a couple of interviews and it was similar to previous stuff he'd said, but it was very entertaining. I was a bit in awe because there was one point where he just built a whole story on the spot. He pointed to one audience member and asked, "What do you do?" Turns out he was a retired police officer. And then he goes, "Okay, here's why I might want to murder you by stabbing you with my fountain pen. And next to you is your wife. And here is why she might want to murder you because maybe you're having an affair with the woman sitting next to her." And I could go around the whole audience and give everyone a motive of why they would want to murder this man. It was incredible to watch him weave this story from almost nothing. And I think it was at this point he talked about the the physical and social setting of the story. He said the milieu was the most important aspect of the book and the most interesting part for him. The murder is basically an excuse to explore these worlds. And I thought that was a really interesting perspective on the genre. So I had a great time, but I was initially surprised at how cheap the ticket was. Included in the VIP ticket was guaranteed one of the front row seats for the interview, front line for the meet and greet, and a signed and dedicated hardback book. Really, if you think about it, you're paying full price for the book, and then you're paying 5 to 10 quid for the whole experience. Like, how mad is that? If that was a best selling musical artist, I'd pay triple the price for a back seat in the top stall, watch them on the big screen, and see their tiny figure moving down below. And when I got there, I was genuinely surprised at how small the number of people showed up. There was about 300 people, but it could have filled up 500. Bearing in mind that he has been consistently a best selling author for decades and has cornered two markets: the more retired women who read crimes and thrillers, and the younger audience like myself, who grew up reading Alex Rider, which is the equivalent of, I think, maybe the Percy Jackson series in the States, which is about a 14-year-old spy. And it's the series that gets so many kids into reading. But now that I think about it, Beth O'Leary also didn't have a massive crowd that I thought she would have. Like when I showed up an hour early for her because I wanted to get really good seat and I assumed there would be a massive queue. I don't understand how these heavy hitters are not commanding big enough crowds to fill up a theatre. Years ago, I saw Stephen Fry when he was promoting, I think, his second Mythos book, and I saw him in one of the main theatres in Manchester, the Lowry, and he filled it up no problem. So I assumed all big authors would do that. But yeah, that was almost my biggest takeaway. I mean, I would have paid double for that experience, and I think those who were there, who were also big fans of his, would have happily paid more as well. It was such an entertaining experience, and he was fantastic. And I feel like he deserves to sell out stadiums. So the talk was amazing. And then I got into the signing queue and I met him and I asked him to write a piece of advice to an aspiring author in my notebook. And he did. And this is what he said.
Most important thing you can say to a writer. Believe in yourself.
Thank you so much.